The Graphic Histories Podcast.
I got bit by a radioactive bug. I tried an experimental drug. Went up for a stroll on a gamma testing range. I found an enchanted hurricane. I made a serum that made me small. I modified the serum so it would make me tall. Radioactive isotope in my eyes. Dying alien helped me accessorize. I gained the proportion and strength of a spider. Now I'm invincible and I can fly. I lost my sight, my other senses were heightened. I'm gonna put on my pajamas and go fight crime.
Hey there, and welcome to the Graphic Histories Podcast. My name is André, your podcast host. Big thanks to Uka the Mock for our theme song, Superpowers. And big thanks to you, gentle listener, for tuning in once again. I am back from my vacation in Mexico. I was gone for a week. Unfortunately, while I was gone, I didn't have that week to make up for the fact that a couple of people that I had set up to record, so that I usually have a bit of a backlog, I had two people cancel, and unfortunately due to that, I wasn't able to have an episode ready. Usually I'd have like a whole week to make up that difference. Didn't happen. So unfortunately, we didn't have an episode last week. I am sorry, but we are back this week with a great, fantastic episode. I speak with Mark Oakley. Now, this is actually such a long conversation and an awesome conversation that I decided to break it up into two parts because I wanted you to hear the whole thing. We talk a lot about some metaphysical stuff, the way Mark views life, a bit of his journey to get to where he is. Mostly a lot of insight into who he is as a person through his sort of unique experiences, where he grew up and other things like that. But yeah, it's a great conversation. Mark's a super thoughtful guy, definitely a thinker. And we get into some really fun conversation. So I want you to get that whole conversation. And as such, I wanted to make this a two-parter. So we're going to do part one, and then we'll return next week with part two. So I can't thank Mark enough for being so generous with his time, coming on the show, and having a great conversation. And I loved it. I definitely going to look him up when I'm in the Valley and make an effort to get to talk with him a little more whenever I see him out of con somewhere. I used to see him around quite a bit. I haven't done as many cons in the last little while, COVID and all that stuff, but slowly working on getting back into them, doing the art thing, and working on some comics, so it's all in the mix. Had a really good vacation. I read a lot, drank a lot, smoked some cigars, went for a lot of swimming, and just sort of lounged. I got 3 books read in the time I was gone, which are awesome because I love reading, and I can't find the time as much to do it, but I did there, and man, what a fun time. I think everybody should, if you can. I mean, obviously, I know it's not easy to say, hey, go on vacation if you can't afford it, but I was lucky enough to be able to put a little money away so that I could go this year with my wife, and man, we had a really, really good time, and it's good to be back. I miss my cats. I miss my friends, but man, there's something about a little slice of heaven where you don't got to answer emails, you don't got to figure out anything, you just got to lay there and read, eat, and enjoy yourself. And boy, did I. But I did also deeply enjoy this conversation that I had with Mark Oakley. So here it is, part one of my talk with creator of Thieves Kings, Star Drop, and a bunch of really cool projects, Mark Oakley.
I do believe everything is good. All right, awesome. Cool. So I just want one last test. Am I making eye contact with you, or is it a little weird?
No, it's good.
All right, perfect. My little plan came together. It's all about the presentation, right? So
excellent.
Yeah. All right, cool. All right, so I'll give it to you, host.
Well, the way I kind of do these, I'm not sure you ever listen to one, is that...
I heard, I went through one. Yeah, it was great.
Oh, cool. Which one?
I think it was your last one.
With Anthony Height?
Yes, I believe, yes. So.
Yeah, it was a great one. Great conversation. Just that. So where are you at nowadays? Are you still in the Valley?
I am, I'm kind of looking down into the Valley. I'm on what they call the South Mountain. And so it's like, you're in Wolfville, and then you kind of drive up a big hill and then down into the Gaspereau Valley where all the grapevines and the river and the pastoral beauty lives, and then up this friggin' road, which is like, it's kind of like the surface of the moon. It's got so many craters, and my little poor little Honda designed for city driving is just like beat to crap on it. But then we're up here, and it's just gorgeous. We live in a little rented sort of, I don't know, an extent an in-law addition on a big
Uh-huh.
house. So our neighbors are friends of ours, so we've got this really nice relationship. There's a
Oh,
big
that's
dog
great.
running the back, so it's lovely. But I'm a mountain man. I don't see people. I just see dogs, and
I
so yeah,
I always felt that way a bit about you in a way, because like when I first met you, you were kind of around in like Halifax doing like the different cons, so you kind of rub elbows there. But I remember you'd moved out to the valley, and then there was
yep,
one show, I can't remember what one it was. It might have been Decaf or
mm,
TCAF or Decaf. But you would like you got a bus down or something, and you had like a
yep,
pallet with all your stuff on it for the
yeah.
bus. And I remember, and you're like loading your stuff on from the mountain, and I remember just thinking like, what is this guy's life like? Like, what is he? Where's he living? What's he doing? I was like.
Yes, it's no, cities are a big deal. I mean, okay, I used to live in like Toronto, downtown Toronto, right
Mm,
across from the Eaton Center, and I was Mr. I don't know, what do you call it? Like I was just so urban and so,
mhm.
just plugged into the city. And now it's all like there might be five people within 2 miles of me,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And now when I go into a small city, cute little city like Halifax, I find it kind of overwhelming.
Yeah.
My senses are so open these days that just like I had this one girlfriend, and she was hypersensitive. She was from she just I don't know if there were health issues or psychological issues.
Hmm.
There's a whole sort of story, but she was just very sort of easily overwhelmed, and she'd like come up with a solution because it was such an issue with her. So she goes, "Oh, no, when you're in a big city, you find the cemetery. No one goes to the cemeteries. It's like a little park with no people and just dead people. They're the most relaxing kind, and you just sit there." And she was right. Like it's just like you step out of this high energy sort of slipstream of reality, and then you're suddenly just surrounded by calm. And I've actually tapped into that trick once or twice. And there's a big cemetery not too far from the bus station in Halifax. So
Yeah.
yeah,
that's interesting. I really like that. It makes sense too. Although you find the bigger cities get, the further away the cemeteries get from anywhere near the core, unless it's like a really, really old
yeah.
place. But I remember one time, I think it was This Hour's 22 Minutes, did a funny gag about, it was like a travel ad for Halifax or Dartmouth, and it was like at one point they go, "Do you like being reminded of the grim specter of death? Well, you can every day by passing by our massive graveyard in the middle, like right in the middle of." Which that always made me
Oh,
laugh. Every time I pass that
yep.
graveyard, when I go into Halifax, I always think about it. Where are
Yep.
you
Yeah.
from originally?
I was born in Montreal, in Quebec, and
Oh.
we were in this little community. It was funny because it was not. I don't know. I mean, when you're little, you don't have any reference points, but it
Hmm.
was not a happy time. My father is a British expat, and so
Oh.
he's an engineer, and he was just one of these guys who just picked up languages really easily. So he knew French, and he was working for Northern Telecom, is what they called it at the time, Nortel. And they
Hmm.
said, "Okay, we need an engineer in Canada. You're going." And he's like, "Okay." "And we need one who can speak French. You're going to Quebec." He's like, "Right on. Yes, sir." And so I was born in this little French district of Pierrefonds, and we were the English family. And I don't know, are you from Quebec, or where were
No, no,
you
I'm from here. From here.
okay.
I know my name
I
seems like I should be from the Frenchest place in the world, but I
Well,
grew up
yeah,
in.
I get you get that question a lot, I would
Yeah.
imagine.
Oh
But
yeah.
so no, it was like I was bullied mercilessly, and it was like
Really?
I was the weird little English kid, and I had this hello, let's be friends, like because you just um,
You're like a Harry Potter sort of,
it
it's
was
a kid that
I don't
just
know.
escaped from the book and right into life in Quebec.
It felt a little bit like it, and I didn't understand why everyone hated me. Maybe I don't know. It's all skewed from a 6 year old's perspective. But then
Hmm.
we moved to New Brunswick, and wow, that was where life began.
Mm.
And we were in this little town called East Riverside, because I think it was on the side of the river. There was like downtown was a corner store called Kent's, and I had two best friends. Like those best. Did you ever see that movie Stand by Me?
I was just about to say that, like Stand By Me friends,
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah, that's
It
hilarious.
And the
It's a
same
great
kind of
movie.
community. We had like railroad tracks and a lake and tons of space and just running around room. We didn't have any giant bullies with guns, so
Yeah, I was going to
we
say, did you find a dead body in the woods at
no
any
no
point?
no dead bodies.
That's good.
Yeah, the Stephen King aspect was sort of mercifully, absent. But I spent only 3 years there. But it was just like, and that was when Star Wars came out, and that was a just such a. I was, oh, this is what being alive is great. Oh, I get it. Oh, and then we moved to Toronto, and I was heartbroken because I was leaving my best friends behind. But
Yeah.
Toronto was also wonderful, and it was during a period where I think the city had the GTA was maybe 1 million people,
Mm.
and when I moved away, it was like 4 million. So it kind of went through this big transformation, but it was that was really good too. Had some excellent friends there, and I moved away in my God. I think I've been almost half my life in Nova Scotia now,
Oh,
just on my
wow.
own. Yeah, I think it was like 2003-ish. Man, it's not half my life, but
Good chunk of it.
2004. Yeah, big chunk. And just moved out here. And it was just to get out of the city because Toronto was beginning to impose its bigness on me. And I just found I didn't understand what was happening. And I made a bunch of friends who, yeah, this is a weird thing. Like, I don't know how uh, life sort of guides you through its many corridors, but I woke up one morning and realized like all of, oh, hang
It's
on a
okay.
second.
It's okay.
I gotta shut a door.
Okay.
Girls, that's enough. I
It's all good.
just learned something about my pet. I have never seen her, like we live out in Coyote land, right?
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna catch my breath while I'm talking here.
Oh, no worries. We have a lot of them out my way. I live in, like, when you're talking about living, the joy of living kind of the middle of nowhere.
Uh-huh.
I moved into a place. I live in Truro, just outside of Truro, and
Okay.
there's a small community called Old Barns, which is about 10 minutes outside of Truro, and that's where I live, which is generally farmland and a lot of like the houses are nearby, but the Cobequid Bay is right here. Like you can
Mhm.
walk along it. It's where the trail starts. It's really cool, but at night sometimes the coyotes are insane, like the noises of them screaming. And actually, lately, the last maybe month, I've seen two of them just on the side of the road or in someone's driveway,
Oh,
which is I don't normally see them, but it's strange to see them in the daytime or anywhere really. Normally, they're just a creepy voice in the distance. But
do you
so I
find it
was
like is that like are you scared of coyotes? I mean, how do you react to that?
Not really, although like the other night is funny because we had a New Year's Eve party and it was so warm on New Year's Eve that we have a big fire pit in our backyard, so
Hmm.
we had the fire pit going, and then after everyone kind of took off, we're getting older, so no one's partying till 3 in the morning anymore. My wife went to bed. My wife went to bed, and my friends took off right after midnight. So I was cleaning up, and I'm my quiet place, I guess. Everybody has like their little special space, I guess, where they can just sit inside themselves and sort of,
Yeah.
and mine is generally like after everyone goes to bed, it's just me, and I'll have a cigar if I do that. I don't do that
Hmm.
all the time, but maybe have a few drinks, sit in my front deck, listen to music, put my headphones on. So I was like, I was kind of cleaning up and I was doing that, and I was like, the fire was still kind of going, and I was like, well, I'll go. I'm still wired. I'll go out and sit by the fire. So I
Sure.
put my headphones on, listened to music, went out, put more wood in the fire, was sitting there, and then as my friends were leaving early, you could hear the coyotes really loudly. And they were kind of marveling at the noise. And I remember sitting there and then thinking, oh, right, the coyotes. And I kind of like looked behind me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you're like, I'm sitting in the fire and I don't know, it's just darkness behind me into the woods. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess if they were to come out, maybe I should face the woods just in case,
Wow. Yeah.
So
I guess there's like, okay, so a couple of stories come to mind. My very first sort of experience coming from the city, everything was terrifying because people don't tell you stories about, like, they say, oh, it's beautiful. There's apples. There's a nice
yeah.
parade. It's a good place to be. The air's clean. Oh, okay, that
Yes.
sounds good. But watch out for, and they would just sort of list these stories, which I think, I don't know, there's a joy in the storyteller of
Oh,
making
yeah.
something more dramatic than it is. But I was coming out like, I grew a goatee to look tougher because I heard people get beat up out loud out here. Okay, I guess I just have to buckle down and get into bar fights. I don't know. Never, never
You're just
happened,
watching
but
like Roadhouse on repeat. You're like, all right,
it
this
was,
way you
yeah, it was
Yeah.
just um and the other one was the coyotes because you read stories about, oh, there was a woman going for a hike in the woods and she got eaten to
Yeah.
death. You know, it
Yeah,
was
that happened a few years ago in New Sydney, I think it was, or somewhere in Cape Breton. It was a jogger got killed by coyotes in the daylight.
oh yeah, it's not and I've had a one run in with a really like I was with a friend of mine. She has two little boys. I guess they were like 6 and 7, and we're farting around in there. And they had a big lot. She ran a restaurant, and it was on it was sort of surrounded. It used to be an old school. They'd
Oh,
knocked
cool.
the school down and left one outbuilding up, and they turned that into a restaurant. And so we're playing around there, and we hear this what sounded like an injured bird, like a big goose or something. And they're going, I hear and I'm going, yeah, it sounds like a hurt goose. Is the goose okay? He says, I don't know. I guess we can go look for it. Little did I know that coyotes are smart. So we trek out there, and I actually brought a big knife because I think, oh geez, if it is an injured bird, because I'm
Yeah.
completely, chumped by a coyote fake
Yeah.
sound, I might have to like put it out of its misery. And we're walking, and my friend was with me, like their mom, and she's just like, I see it. And what? And we look up, and I'm like, I see nothing, I see nothing. And suddenly, boom, there's this thing, and it's like mangy, has these crazy yellow eyes, and it's looking at me. And I got these two little morsels, and it's just like you can see it doing the math.
Yeah.
And
It
I'm
was
like,
worth it.
I'm like, okay, I got a knife, and suddenly, like, okay, so we back out of there, and it was fine. But that was like,
Yeah.
okay,
Oh,
but
nature is scary. It's very scary. Like I love it, but there's a level, it's like going in the ocean. Like it's beautiful, but there are things there, land's a little easier. And the ocean scares me a lot too for that same reason.
yeah,
But it's like when you enter these worlds, like when you're off in the woods by yourself or you're swimming somewhere in the ocean, you're in a different food chain. Like
yeah,
you're not at the top anymore. If there not that there are a lot of bears and cougars around, but if there was one and it wanted you, it could probably get you. And in the ocean, there's even worse stuff. But it's
yeah. I'm
it
I'm
like
not a swimmer. I'm not. I
uh
don't like oceans. I mean, I love the idea. I like looking at them from far
mm,
away. But for me, when I go swimming with friends, I really have to like. I'm so comfortable on land, So when I'm
yeah.
in the water, I can really feel exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Um,
I watched a horror movie a while ago. I'm a big horror movie guy called In a Violent Nature. It's this one that came out last year, and they were kind of the gimmick was it was sort of like a Friday the 13th movie from the point of view of Jason. So you're
mhm.
actually just seeing it all from the point of view of the reanimated killer
Uh-huh.
zombie thing in the woods that are just killing people with a hatchet or whatever. But there's sort of an element to it that sort of plays with the idea that nature in itself is just kind of terrifying. Like, there's like that point where someone gets away and they're just looking into the woods and you don't see the thing coming. She essentially got away, but just seeing the woods and like the unknown of what could come out of it, there's like this level where you're like, oh, just kind of hits you in this
Yeah.
weird primitive part of yourself that are like, you know,
Woods are
uh,
terrifying.
oh
I
yeah,
think we've got like almost biological sort of like warnings sort of set up. Like that's a big,
hmm
dark, scary place where the wolves live. And no, and someone pointed out to me, it's like, oh, you think of nature like, oh, it's a beautiful grassy day with flowers. Yeah, lie down there for 10 hours and
yeah,
see if you don't get. I mean, the world's like, well, if you're not using your body, we got to recycle. Let's get this on. We got bugs, we got little rodents. It's you can't sit still, right?
Yeah, same with
So
animals too. Like you think they're
yeah,
cute, but like put your cat out into the wild and watch it.
yeah,
See what it does to a squirrel or a bird if it catches one. It's not
yeah.
pretty.
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's
So I'm
it's
sorry.
horrifying. No,
It's
no,
so
it's cool.
there's my little puppy Peaches, and you're like,
hmm
I wonder how she's going to be if she's faced with a threat.
hmm
And I just witnessed that. And
Oh,
so
really?
there's the Amazon driver,
Yeah.
and they're howling at the door, and the box is outside. He's getting into his truck, and he's about to leave. And I go, okay, honey, just stay inside. I'm going to get the box. And she just does the little wiggle where she's through, and she's bolting at him like a
Oh,
friggin'
wow.
torpedo. And I'm
Wow.
like, I'm gonna get sued. This is great. So I'm like chasing after her with my big boots, and there's like a foot of snow, and it's all. I'm just like, Peaches, and you're yelling Peaches. So that sounds anyway. And luckily, it was a dude who I guess he's a valley man. He was this
hmm
guys who are in their late 60s still working friggin' Intelcom. You're just like, oh, it's rough. But he's
Yeah.
like, no, no, she's just a little pup. She's fine. And her tail was wagging, so she's, I don't know, like, is it a threat? Is it a new friend? I don't know.
hmm
But just the fact that she didn't listen and just went
Yeah.
was like, okay, that's
Well, they're
I'm a
very
little proud.
protective, right? They're,
Yeah,
very protective of you.
yeah,
Yeah. It's funny when you mentioned just sort of like the inherent like how we have sort of evolved in a way to like have these sort of things in our DNA about nature.
mm,
One of my more interesting facts is that humans can differentiate the color green more than any other color.
really.
And the reason they think that is because when we were monkeys in the jungle, we could see predators easier if we could
Mm.
differentiate between all the various greens. If something was hiding in there, we could pick it out faster.
You know what's funny is this puppy. mountain man with only two friends. They're both dogs. She's a yellow lab,
Yeah.
and as she's growing from little puppyhood, she was like the size of a potato when we
Yep.
first got her, and now she's almost 80 pounds. I think there's some
Oh,
bulldog in her. She's built, and her eyes were supposed to turn brown or black or whatever labs are supposed to do. Hers stayed this really light shade, and my wife is like, "Honey, she's got green eyes. I wonder if she's sick." And I was like, "No, she's probably just." So she looked it up. Apparently, no, this is a thing. Like point something percent of labs have green eyes, and there's a name for it. They're called Dudleys.
really?
And yeah, so it's a special kind of, and they have little odd. She's going, yeah, Dudleys are actively actually less like labs, who are supposed to be these dopey family
Yeah.
dogs. She's just like hyper. She's like a little tornado. And I was like, really? But here's the thing, they're not green. Everyone's, oh, she's got green eyes. I'm going, I'm not seeing green. I'm seeing like amber gold.
Hmm.
It's like, no, honey, those are green eyes. I'm like, have I been painting fucked up for my whole life? I don't know. It's like but that was really weird because I'm really trying to see the green, and all
Yeah.
I'm seeing is like is amber.
Wow.
It's which
That's
I don't know,
wild.
seems kind of funny.
Yeah.
First, I'm always learning stuff. How all my shortcomings,
Yeah.
my rods and my cones, they're all but
Yeah, well, that's especially someone that does like, a comic stuff or art stuff. I mean, you're looking at color constantly all the time.
yeah,
I know I agonize it over when I'm doing stuff, and at some point when people say like, "Oh, you're the designer, you're the graphic designer, you must the color, the best color things." It's like, well, not necessarily. Like, I think I do. It's more of an aesthetic choice based on what my eyes are seeing than it is actually knowing if my eyes are seeing the same thing everyone else is. But
yeah.
I'm sure if you could pop someone else's eyes in your head and look through their rods and cones, things would have a different shade. And that's kind of weird to me. It's like that weird idea that like perceiving life, like my reality is what I perceive it to be. So
Yeah.
my reality is vastly different than anybody else's reality, but we all kind of agree that we're sharing the same one and it's all fine based on what our eye sees and what our brain translates and tells us it is. It
I
gets
was
in.
having this discussion with my wife, and she was sort of like, "No, my reality," and I'm going, "Well, okay, I get it, I get what you're saying, but it's you understand like we don't all have an individual like there is a hard reality that none of us can properly sort of have the best we have is like a map."
Yeah.
A map of reality. If your map is good, then you don't bump into walls or whatever. But some people's maps are a little different, and they're all fed with information from our unique perspectives.
Hmm.
So the best you can do, like I feel like what I'm trying to do is just get a really accurate map of reality and just constantly realize, oh, that whole mountain range never was there. God, it's just, but that's sort of, anyway, we're just having this discussion the other night and I was like, oh, I never really thought of it's the map metaphor,
Yeah.
um, but
That's
as
actually
in
really
terms
cool.
of like greens and colors, I wanted to ask, like, I was listening to your interview and I was never 100% clear what your involvement with comics are. Like, I know you write or you edit. Like, I got a bit of a career path, but are you an artist? Do you do
Yeah,
graphic
well,
design or?
when I back in the day, I'm a graphic designer. That's my job.
Okay,
But I do conventions where I sell mostly art prints.
okay,
And I did do a few little indie comics back in the day. I'm kind of working on a new one now because it's one of those things where you're like, I'll get back to that someday, and then you kind of focus on the
the paying
the
job. Yeah,
yeah, and then eventually a decade goes by, and you're like, oh shit, like I haven't done anything in a long time, and so I've kind of come up with an idea, like, and I'm starting to work on a little indie book. But I've been kind of far removed from it in a while. Like I've still been doing the prints through different cons doing that thing, which is fun,
yeah.
and I dig that. But the idea of making my own book is kind of it's getting to the point of like I got to do this. So
Mm.
yeah, I have. I've actually kind of moved in this. You seem like a traditionalist to me, so I've moved to the trying the drawing tablet, and I've been really digging that and finding it saving me a lot of time with my busy
Yeah.
life to be able to get stuff out there. So working on that now and kind of getting some stuff going. But yeah, I'll chat with you a little bit about the idea later because I like it. I'm pretty happy about it. So
Oh, that's cool. That is good. So,
yeah.
hang on. Do you consider a drawing tablet a traditionalist thing now, or is
No,
it?
no, no. I said I figure you're probably more like you're using. Oh, are you on a tablet now?
I am on a tablet right
Oh
now.
shit!
Yeah,
I thought I don't know for some reason it always struck me as more of a
as a piece
traditionalist with
of.
pencil and paper.
I like to keep my this is like I pulled this up for this is kind of like just a screen. I have a bunch of these. These are like warm up drawings, and sometimes you come up with a good warm up drawing, and sometimes not. And but when I come up with a good one, it's like, oh, this is going to be my wallpaper for if I have to do like a Zoom call, for instance, right?
Yeah.
So and it's also good to have if like in like a Zoom call where there's technical stuff, you can go, okay, do you mean this? And you can like
Yeah.
sketch out a quick whatever. So I do find it useful to have up.
Oh, that's awesome.
Um, but now I feel like I've always been like a tech nerd ever since I
Hmm.
was little.
Really?
And I remember I'm at the same drafting board that I built when I was like 19. And
Oh,
it's got
wow.
like,
Really? That's awesome.
yeah, it was my first big thing. Like I had like a flat desk and I was wrecking my big tall back, leaning way over drawings. I need to build a drafting board. So like I built the foundation for my little comics, journey. And I did a good enough job with it that it doesn't wobble. It holds up steady. My friend had a wood shop that he'd put together, and so that's that. But I'm working at going, it'd be so cool is a digital drafting board. There's nothing like it. There's nothing, no styluses. It was just, I mean, maybe in some sectors of like CNC machines, they might have had like point tap drawing vectors and whatnot, but nothing
Hmm.
like this. And I was like, I can picture it. In the future, they'll have something where you can have like a digital brush and a digital pencil, and you can do paints. And I hadn't even conceived of something like an undo button, but
Yeah.
when the Wacom came along, I was like, it's here. Oh my God. And now I'm actually at a point where I have like, I just put a very big, it's like a 27-inch digital thing here with some Wacom guts in it, or
Yeah.
Wacom. And the Japanese say it Wacom.
Oh,
Did you
really?
know that?
No, I
Yeah.
did not know that. I had a Wacom tablet, and I would call it Wacom. But I eventually just got the iPad. I think I watched. I talked about this a few times, but Adam Gorham, who draws for Marvel at I think it was the East Coast Comic Expo, was drawing on his iPad Pro, and I remember
Mm,
watching it, going like, "Oh man," because you can just sit there and like, or go over there, or be outside, or sit in a swing, and so I started playing with that, and I've gotten quite used to it. I sort of dig it. I just got to get to the. I'm not quite at the level where I'm like exporting it all into like Photoshop to add the letters and stuff, but
right,
I'm
right.
not quite there. But
I Here's the funny thing is like as much as I love the technology, and I don't think I would ever go back to pen and pencil and paper. And I've
mm,
done miles and miles and miles of graphite on paper, and it's
no, yeah,
um, I'm not that good at it. Like
yeah,
because I mean, being able to refine your line and really sit there and get it just right. I was that makes my stuff look better. But when it
mm,
was all like you get one chance at your ink
yeah.
line, I was, if I'm
Yeah,
shooting
I'd
10
fuck it
hoops,
up
I
a
get four
lot.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I remember when I did one of my comics, I did this one called Humbug. It was like a comic I'd done many, many, many years ago where it was like a steampunk Scrooge story. So it's like a
Okay.
Christmas Carol, and Scrooge has to keep sort of redeeming himself for being a dick by going off and
Uh-huh.
fighting steampunk monsters in Victorian England. And
Right on.
it was fun. Like I dug it, and I planned to do more, but then shortly after I came up with it, I'm convinced, because I handed it up to people at cons and stuff, that somebody got a hold of it, because like it got on the same idea got put up on like Diamond like 6 months later. It was almost
Oh,
like
I see.
very similar. I don't know, like that's just me trying to validate, and maybe we both pulled it from the ether, who knows.
Yes,
But
yeah.
uh so I remember like I was working on the second one. I really got hung up on trying to be as traditional as possible. This is
Mhm.
before we had like the drawing tablets as easy as we do now and all that sort of stuff. And I remember I got the ink pen with the flanges, and I was like, this is how I'm going to start doing it. So I draw it all, and then I fuck up every like almost every the big pool, and like, oh no, and
Yep.
you sop it up and then try to white out it over, and then do it a little more in the big pool, and like, oh god damn it, like it just I would continually be blotching all over the thing, and it was like I'm sure those pages are here somewhere, and they're just covered in whiteout because it just fucked them.
I would how long has it been since you looked at those pages?
Oh geez, probably like 10 years.
Give yourself an afternoon and pull them out and glory in them because I feel like there's something about digital that removes a whole layer of perception. Like
Yeah.
when I was in Toronto, actually one of the reasons I moved out to Nova Scotia was I had this great friend, and he was from like Middleton. He
Mm,
said, "Dude, you got to come out here." He took me out to visit his family, and we just drove around a bit. And I was like, "Yeah, I got to move. This is great. This is a step up from where I was."
mm,
And but he was a kung fu guy, and he was like, ex special forces and kind of like the sort of into the jujitsu before that
mm.
was a thing,
Yeah, yeah.
and he was all about the energy work. Like he had native upbringing in Nova Scotia and just had multiple influences.
Mhm.
And he's one of these guys who, like, I have lots and lots of cool stories where it's just like, you know, things that for me verified some of the stuff that he was telling me. And one of the things that I was asking was like, okay, like here's a digital thing that I did, and here's the is there a difference? He goes, oh yeah, there's a huge difference. I go, what do you mean? So, well, this one glows. Like you can see the passion and the love, and I can see where you were, what the feelings that you were having at the time. Those are baked into the piece. And going, really? And he goes, yeah. I go, well, does that affect people? Oh yeah, absolutely. They just don't know they're being affected. And going,
Mhm.
well, wait, well, hang on. So I send this to print, and I remember why this was concerning me because I didn't have like a digital pad. What happened was Quebecor or whoever was doing my Le Bon Fond, the printing out agency out there was going from taking photographs like film, like they do these great big
Oh yeah.
film of a page and then make plates from those, and so you have a very analog process
Yeah.
through. And I was because he was saying, well, yeah, basically some of that imprint of the energy that you put into the artwork gets transferred and it will actually be in the final comic. And I'm going, does it last? Or it goes, no, no, it fades over time. And then, like, your my comics now are probably just dead wood and whatever. But the original artwork, it's there forever. Like when you go
Mm.
to an art gallery and you're looking at those beautiful Da Vinci's or the Rembrandts, like you're feeling it. And
Yeah.
there's a reason for that. And I thought, what a tragedy. Like, so everything digital is just like all that stuff is just instantly vaporized immediately upon hitting the screen.
Mm.
And I remember at one point going, all right, I'm going to fight against this. The corruption of the soul. I will not do this. So I contacted the printer and I said, hi. And I'm like, when you're like nervously putting forward an idea, you know, it sounds ridiculous. And
Uh-huh.
so this, the print agent's just going, uh-huh, so you don't want us to scan it? I'm like, I'm going, I'm like, can you still, can you still photograph it? He goes, I suppose for you, but I don't know how long we'll have those machines commissioned. So
Yeah.
anyway, and so
Can you just save
anyway,
the energy, man? Just save the
just
energy.
save the energy, man.
The guy on the phone's like, what?
Oh God, yeah. So I was that guy. They put up with me. They were marvelous people, and I was always a
No,
very
but
yeah. But at some point I made a bargain with myself. I said, well, you know what? I'm just going to. I don't think any. I think everyone's wiped it out of themselves anyway. Everyone's
mm,
locked into their cell phone reality. I don't know if anyone notices it. So I feel kind of like I betrayed my soul in sticking with the digital. But digital's fast. I love it. It makes things easy. But I'll tell you what. Every time I run into like one of those top level Marvel DC artists. There's a guy out in Moncton. I can't remember his name,
Nick
but
Bradshaw?
sorry,
Nick
Brett. Yeah, yeah,
Bradshaw?
Nick. Yeah, Nick stuff.
I actually have
Names.
one of his original pieces right here by my
Oh, can I see it?
it's from his Ash versus Evil Dead, his Army
Oh, right on.
Darkness comic. Like it's how when he first started, it's a really early piece, but
He is so good at his
oh
stuff.
yeah.
Like I was able to. There's that convention out in Moncton. I don't know. Maybe you've probably been there.
East Coast Comic
Um,
Expo. Yeah, I love it.
yes,
I
and
just sent an application for this year, in fact.
he uh he has people over to his house because he's the local superhero of the city, right?
Hmm.
Complete with like hangers on. Like when he walks around the show, he's got like six guys or I guess close friends he grew up with, and they sort of walk around like, oh, we're part of
Yeah.
and and he deserves it because so I don't know if you visited his studio, but he's got like a glass drafting board and a big sheet of paper on it, and just sort of use halfway through drawing like dinosaurs or something, and it's all brushwork, and I'm
Hmm.
just like, this is. I can feel it. It was like, oh, it made me want to cry just
Yeah.
because I could feel what he was doing. He'd stuck to that course, and I was like, that's the difference. And like, okay, Mark, you're a storyteller and an art hack, and this is just the place you occupy, live it. But that's not what I am. And
Wow, it's
yeah,
comparison's the enemy of joy, they say, right? Isn't that the
exactly, yeah,
line? So like you're never yeah, I feel like that when I look at his art too. It's insane. But I find that I have a lot of those artist editions, those big books that like they put out where it's like scanned like
yes,
full size scanned pages of the original like Kirby and like all of the big ones, Kubert and Bagley and Ramita and all these guys that I like envy.
I got a
Samba
Frazetta.
Sema.
I have a Frazetta one, which is like it doesn't fit on any shelves, so it's
Yeah,
like
I
flat
do.
somewhere. But it's gorgeous, gorgeous work. But
When I
yeah, yeah.
built, I have a library in my house that my dad built. Just it was a sewing room for the woman that owned the house before we bought it, and
Mhm.
we put shelves everywhere. But on one wall, I think Cal mentioned this to me, Strange Adventures, that because I was telling him I was going to do this. He said make sure you leave a place where there's like a really because you get some books that are just too big, and I have quite a few of those art editions on a lower shelf that has a very high thing, so that I can make sure that they
That's a good
fit in there.
idea.
I got
Yeah,
some
that's
like
a
Eisner Spirit ones and like one of his ones. magnolia. But when you look through those things and you're seeing the little scratches, the little mistakes where they white over it, the little notes in the margins. It's just that you're right. It kind of crackles, and I collect vinyl like records
Mm. Okay. Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
and like Blu-rays, like movies.
Mhm.
And there's something about physical, like the ritual of taking out the physical thing, and like when you put an album on and listening to the whole album and like looking through the art and the little book that comes with it. I don't know. There's a joy to that. There's some tactile. I think humans are kind of meant to feel, like physically touch and feel things, and that it's sort of like I don't
Yeah.
know, just connects in your brain in a way. So I can see
My
that art part
favorite,
of it.
I'm not, I mean, video games, sure, they're fun, but my
Yeah.
favorite form of sort of, I don't know, kitschy, plinky entertainment is pinball.
Oh yeah.
And well, I was trying to explain why, and like I love this, and it's feeding something on a level that I didn't really understand. Like, I'm a talker, so I got to
Mhm.
kind of learn. Oh, that's what I think because I've already said it. There it is.
Yeah.
Um, and I realized like, okay, with a video game, it's ones and zeros. You're dealing with a simulation, and any kind of like challenge is pre-configured. I mean, there's not really any randomness, so the
No.
randomness is not random when you bore down far
No.
enough. With pinball, you're playing the universe. Like you're dealing with 100% analog, right? Like that ball is going to be affected by that butterfly wing in flapping in
Yeah.
Australia, right?
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
and so you're literally going, oh, I'm in I'm not escaping. I'm part of it. I'm having, it's a relationship with the universe, and I sort of feel like this is oh, this is spiritual for me. Yeah, that's why I'm wasting money on this thing. That's just yeah, I'm feeding the soul, and so I love pinball for that reason because you're having an analog experience. And no, I think there's something to that. And I think vinyl records, people swear they can tell the difference. I can't. I'm not sophisticated enough, but
I don't know.
like an
I
MP3
don't
is good
know.
enough for
Yeah,
me.
like it's honestly like I always say because I love collecting stuff as you can see in my nerdy ephemera around me.
Yep.
But I've also put a bit of a kibosh on it for the most part, unless it's something really special, just because you run out of space. But
Yeah.
if this all burned down, the house burned down, and they gave
Oh,
my
don't say that. Yeah,
no, no,
yeah.
well, knock on
It's no,
wood.
no,
But if the
no.
uh, the insurance check came, I don't think I'd restock too much. I think I would probably go for a much smaller thing and just do it. Like I got I recently, and I always thought this was sort of sacrilege too, was got the Marvel Unlimited app. So like it's like $10 a month, and every single comic Marvel's ever put out is there. So like you can if I'm like I want to read all of Sal Buscema's Silver Surfer run. Yeah, you're like I can just look it up and then flip through every issue, and they're like they recolor them or they're high res. I don't know what they do. Maybe they probably use AI or something. Who knows? But they're really bright and like seem like when you read old comics, they're pretty faded by that point. It seems to really kept the yeah. It's a cool way to just like finally read anything you never got a chance to read and not take up an entire room of shelf space in my house, which I do love, but I can't go much bigger than I got. So
Yeah. Well, I don't go into my paperwork or collection right now. It's all in boxes in the basement. So we moved into this place. Like I'm married 2 years now, I guess, or
mhm.
one. It kind of runs together. But I've merged lives, and holy smokes, my life got so much better. I don't live in a batch. I have more than one spoon in one bowl, and uh, but now it's like, well, where do we put our stuff, right? So we just didn't have room for like this big wall of stuff that I had,
Mhm.
and even while I was carting around this big collection of books and comics, I was aware of how infrequently I would go over and pull something off and flip through it.
Mhm.
But no, like the so yeah, Jim Butcher, he did a series called The Dresden Files, and I sort of divide my time between. I think I lean more heavily into literature than I do comics. Like I don't know as much about comics as I do about sort of I like books.
Mhm.
And his thing was something that somebody recommended. I was like, I don't know, it sounds dorky. He said, no, no, you'll love it. You'll love it. So I read one. I was like, okay, I'm in. And he did like, so essentially it's a wizard living in modern Chicago. And he advertises in the yellow pages as a wizard, but he's also a private investigator. He's sort of finding who he is. And I guess he's in his 30s and he's just making a go of it as kind of like a crime noir investigator. Let's see how that works. And it quickly escalates into something completely different. Like I don't know if Jim Butcher knew where he was going to end up, but he's one of these great writers who doesn't sort of reset things at the like if he says, "Oh, well, if A happens and then B happens, then what happens next?" And if it requires that I knock down because it's like modern Chicago, so you'll talk about landmarks. If I have to blow up the Bean in Central Park or whatever, I guess I just have to do that. I hope Chicagoans don't mind. And so, and then there's like repercussions. So that happened. And so by the end of it, the one-upping of itself, he's got Odin and Santa Claus, same guy, the Queen of Air and Darkness of the fairy lands. She's a big piece of it. He's dealing with god soldiers. He's got one of his good friends is a knight of the cross, and his sword has one of the nails from that had crucified Christ built into the sword, and he's out there fighting. And and Dresden's kind of like he'll swear, "You shouldn't cuss, Dresden." He's like, "Ah, shut up, Michael." And so they fight vampires and werewolves, and he's got werewolf friends, and just like, and the pacing on this stuff is, I was trying to figure out what he was doing so right, because his formula, it's very formulaic. I would almost call it hack because it's very rote, but he does it so well. Like every page is a cliffhanger to the next page, and you can't stop reading these things. And then when you're done, you're like, okay, wow, that was 3 whole days and do anything else. Well, where's the next one? And you just read them like that. So, um, yeah, I bought the whole series, stuck them on my little ebook, and at night I'm like trying to find common ground with my new wife, and I'm like, honey, we're very different people, but I think, and she likes stuff that I'm like, I can't watch Les Mis, like that's one of her favorite movies. It's too depressing when the woman sells her teeth and cuts her hair off and dies in a ditch. I know I can't out. Um, she's like, well, I'm not going to watch Firefly. Why not? It's got spaceships. I hate spaceships. But we meet with Jim Butcher, and so every night we'll get into bed, and I'll read her a chapter or two until she falls asleep or I fall asleep. And over the course of a little over a year, we ground through all 18 novels and all his short stories, and it was a great way to connect. It was lovely. But that's sort of my nerd private life, and yeah, I highly recommend Jim Butcher's work. He was actually in Halifax for the last HalCon, and I didn't know. Yeah, I don't know I mean, you've met lots of guys, lots of people who are, I would imagine, important to you in a media sense, like heroes and famous people. And I he was one of mine. But what do you say to them? I mean, I don't. Hi, I'm in the lineup. Shake your hand. I like your books. Have a nice day.
Yeah, that's sort of, I mean, when it comes to this sort of thing, it's I try to just take it like I'm meeting a stranger in a sense. I remember I did a chat with a while ago with Mark Russell, who does a lot of really interesting writing for DC. He wrote the Superman Space Age story that I really dug, and a lot of other really cool. So he did a Flintstones kind of revival that is like a very adult centric take on it, where they sort of like analyze how our society is sort of the way it is based on when it was started by like these cave people. Um, but he like I remember a friend of mine mentioned, like, he said it was a great interview. He said, but at one point you you had a moment where I could tell that it was like the fan in you was coming through more than the interviewer, because you were just like, remember this thing you did? Like that was cool, And it's like it's not really a question. It was just sort of a fanboying out about it. And he said that was only once that something happened. There was some sketch on SNL years ago where they did that, where Chris Farley like was talking, like interviewing someone.
I
He's like,
remember
yeah,
that. I
and
remember he had like he had his good shirt and his
yeah.
ugly his tie. That was a brilliant take on it.
And
Yeah.
he would just be like, "Remember that movie where you blew up that thing?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "That was cool."
I think that's why guys like Joe Rogan need to attain a level of individual fame before they can encounter other famous people, because they're already on that level with each other. Um, but because I've had my moments. I was at the one in law. No, where is it? The big one. What's the big convention? Oh, it's been so long since I've been part of the scene. The one
San Diego.
in San Diego Comic Con. Thank you. And so everybody's there. And at the time, Buffy the Vampire Slayer was a big deal, and I was right into that. And I met one of the actors, and it was like one of the Anthony something Head or whatever, Anthony, the guy who played Giles, if you remember anything about the show. Yeah. And he was there, and I said, "Oh," and I'm just kind of like, "Yeah, I'm a comics guy. I'm sort of in the, yeah, I'm gonna go give him one of my books. I want to tell him how much I appreciate his work." So I go up, and I was about 8 feet away, and my knees went out. I was just like, I turned into a blithering idiot, and I gave him a book, and I was like, "Love your work," and he's just like, "So you made these? And I was like, yeah, you could please take this book. And he's like, oh, thank you very much. And I walked away. I said, what the hell happened? That was weird. Like that took some, and that's like that forest, where you're going, no, there's something baked deep. And when you're seeing like a power differential in terms of, I don't know, like human hierarchies, like something kicks in and now you get extra adrenaline that you didn't ask for, but yeah, that was a moment. That was interesting because I met other guys. Like I met with oh, I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. Um, Ralph McQuarrie,
Oh
who
yeah,
was
wow. Yeah, yeah. His art books, like the designs for Star Wars stuff, is incredible.
that was pretty cool. And he was at, I don't know if it was Ralph. Was there another fellow who was working on design as well for Star Wars?
Um, Macquarie's the only one that ever comes to mind. I'm not quite
Yeah,
sure about the
he's
other
the
one.
big name.
Yeah, I don't remember any of the other guys. I know there's people that were like, the writing side of stuff, but as far as like the design for everything like that, he's the only one that that I recall hearing of.
I'm gonna go with Ralph McQuarrie, but I was in Chicago for a Chicago Comic Con, and this was back when I think I had like 8 issues out of my book, like maybe 10, whatever. It was early days. It's still like he's at a table, and my had my willing, unwilling, business partner who I would just drag around, and he would manage tables and stuff. And he's a big nerd, huge Star Wars fan, knows all the trivia, and he was just like, dude, that's I'm gonna say Ralph McQuarrie. He's at his own booth there. And it was one of those things where like, so if you're like a little small press guy like me, you buy a booth and you're there and you just grind through it and that's what's going on. Then you have the big names and they'll show up for like an hour and you get like a lineup out the door to go get a signature from Todd McFarlane or whatever. He was one of those guys, but he's old. And Carson's going, he's the coolest guy out of these whole bunch because everyone else, they'll come, they'll do their 1 or 2 hours and then they leave. He's been there from opening to closing all day. He's just sitting by. No one knows who he is. He's just there, and he's just putting in his time. Say, oh, they paid me to come here and sign stuff, and I'm like, well, who is he? And this is why I'm thinking it wasn't Ralph McQuarrie because I knew that name. So,
Mhm.
and he's like, okay, let me see if I can. Okay, Mark, this man is responsible for the look of Star Wars. It's got to be Ralph. And I said, really? Oh my God. So I went up and was able to shake this man's hand and give him some books. But I didn't have like a shaky moment, but it was definitely like sort of one of those things where time slows down. And you realize, yeah, you shaped like a big portion of my life and my perception of how the things that I love the most and spend most of my working hours focused on, you've you personally as a human have changed, have shaped that. You're extremely important. If you didn't exist, I wouldn't exist the way I am now. And having those sorts of bits of awareness all wash over you as you're shaking this man's hand, that was okay, all right, and it's, yeah, there's something like, I feel like, why don't we feel like that all the time? I feel like we have to turn off that part of our brains just so we can manage day to day.
Well, it's weird when you meet these sort of
Anyway.
people, to me anyway, sometimes because, and I mean, this is kind of a thing with fandom in general, is that like you feel as though you have somewhat of a personal relationship with this person, not necessarily like in the way that like you really, really know them, but in a way their work speaks to you in a way that sort of defines you. So in a way you feel like they have some inner access to you or some kind of a connection that's one-sided because you're experiencing the art, they don't know who you are. So when you meet them and you get a chance to talk to them and you kind of get to know who they are, is when it really sort of get into the more interesting stuff. But I try to approach it all like, well, you're just another human just trying to make your way in this. But you're right, it is hard not to be like, remember this huge thing you did that meant so much to me that was probably just barely an idea you had that you threw in this book or this movie or this comic, and it's like that defined my life. And they're like, yeah, it was just a cool idea I came up with because my friend said something like that. And I don't know, and that was it. And it sort of dispels the magic, but also sort of enhances it in a way because even though it seems so mundane to them, it's just so important to you and maybe somebody else that read it.
Well, it's I think when we're born, we have to project our imaginations to make sense of the world around us. Everything's mythical,
Hmm.
and And so part of us is like, oh, I want to go out and find like a car. What is a car? What makes a car go? I don't know what's under the hood. It's got to be, car magic or some sort of, maybe there's little dinosaurs running in wheels like I saw in the Flintstones. I don't know how it works. And so and there's something glorious about that because it's an exciting vision. I guess if you had the right programming when you were little and the world loved you and your parents were nice to
Mm.
you,
Yeah.
they're not monsters running the cars, but something drives you to crack the hood and look at it. Oh, your dad will go, "Oh, here's how spark plugs work." Back in the '70s, we had spark plugs, and uh, and then you say, "Oh, that's the nuts and bolts," and you realize, "Oh, there's a real realness to it. Like there is no magic. It's this thing. Anyone could come up with this given enough time and creativity. There's down 2%. And yet we're driven to go and uncover all these. We're going to look under the hoods of all the cars. And that's something that as I've gotten older, I wouldn't say I've struggled with it, but I've definitely been aware that I'm actively hacking down the magic and learning the hard nuts and bolts nature of everything.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering like why am I doing this? And yet there's also something I don't know. I'm not finished that journey of understanding why I'm doing this to myself. And is there an upside to it? And is it as exciting as when I was 16 and full of hormones and crazy ideas about how the reality was that I lived in? It's nothing's ever seemed that bright and sparkly and amazing. And why would I give that up is exploring and knowledge bad? No, I absolutely believe the opposite of that. Like I said, this is an ongoing thing that visits my head periodically, and I wrestle with it. I don't know if you even know what I'm talking about or
Oh
what
yeah,
your
yeah.
conclusions are on the same stuff.
No, it reminds me a lot of Douglas Adams, I think, who is, kind of a famous atheist. And I remember reading, I think it might have been what's his name, Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion. And I think like at the beginning, he
Mhm.
has a quote from Adams that says like, "Isn't it enough to enjoy the beautiful garden and not have to look for the magical fairies that live underneath and created it?" Like, and that always sort of stuck with me in a way that it's like, can't we just enjoy the beauty of the thing instead of trying to reason some way that it has to be this beautiful or some divine creature had to have made this for me specifically or for us. And I agree with you 100%. It's easy to kind of lose yourself in that, trying to find all this meaning. And it's like, can't we just enjoy the beauty for the thing of what it is? Isn't that enough meaning? Like, why do we got to go deeper?
Oh, I see. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, for me, I found it went in the opposite direction. Like
Mm,
I remember this story about I don't know, the Zen master, and he says, okay, there are three teacups. He's talking to the student, and the first teacup is the one that you see and you don't understand, you don't appreciate. It's just a teacup to you.
mhm,
But then you begin to know a little bit about the ways of the universe, and the teacup is more than a teacup, and
mm,
you understand. Oh, but then you get older, you got to live in the world. And even though all that is there, it's just a teacup, really. That's the
mm,
third teacup. And so that's what the master gets to.
mm,
And I have found in breaking everything down into nuts and bolts, like I said, my father was an engineer.
mm,
And I went through this phase of like, oh, there's magic everywhere. And I'm really understanding that there's this lower system of just energy work and energies that hold everything together and guide us. And we're part of it and we're consciously aware of things. And there's so many, examples of how you find your faith personally and you can't
mm.
sort of push it on someone else. But for me, it's like well affirmed. But then I feel like I'm back in third teacup. I'm going, yeah, but I still got to pay the rent and the car's broken and I got to
Yeah,
do, and so yeah, that's all there.
yeah.
And then the other thing too is looking through, it's like, I'm not trying to sort of take something that's nuts and bolts and cast magic into it. It's more like, well, the magic is nuts and bolts. It's just a level that,
Mm,
don't you want to know about that too? And I don't think I'm afraid of letting I don't know, the teen drama esque feeling of the spiritual world. Like, oh, it's so beautiful and love. Well, yeah, but it just is. And it's got rules like everything else.
mhm,
And don't you want to know those rules as well? And when you do, it gives you more power over the material world, etc. And so it's like, oh, okay, well, it's just a more complicated machine than what most people experience day to day. But uh, and it doesn't need to be big epic story. That's what my job is. I tell the big epic stories, and we can escape into that and enjoy that and tickle that part of our brains, which is largely chemical. But in reality, it's all this great big Lego classroom that just happens to be half non-material. Um, I'm not being 100% clear about what I'm saying here. I hope I hope you'll allow me to rattle on here as I
No,
do.
no, I love it. I think it's great. Well, I guess getting into the comic side of
Sure, sure.
things, where did you like? So you mentioned that like your escapism has always kind of been books, more so than comics specifically. But like, at what point did you come to appreciate comics as a medium and sort of maybe I guess an avenue for your art to sort of come out?
That's a Yeah, that's an important question because sometimes I ask like, well, why didn't I just become a writer? I
Yeah.
think part of it is like I'm not that great a writer, and I love art. So if I can do both of them, that's something that's not everyone can do, and maybe I can make a career out of that. That's sort of the down and dirty, sort of realistic, sort of well, how do I survive doing something that I enjoy?
Mm.
Okay, get at least reasonably good at two things that most people can't do well at all, and then maybe I've got some reason for people to throw a nickel. That's the cynical way of looking at it. The
Mhm.
other side is, whew, um, a good story makes me insane, and a good drawing does the same thing. And when I say that, like, if you're just the average citizen who isn't quite as plugged in and crazy as I know I am,
Mhm.
they just sort of read one panel to the next, that page is done. But for me, I might hit something where the author, the creator, did something special or touched on something that just really connected, and all the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, and I can't sit. I have to put it down, and I have to stomp around the living room and just try and consume that amazingness. And so something like a Miyazaki film might be a very exhausting thing for me to watch because I get like 10 minutes and just pause. I can't hyperventilate, deal with it, you know? Okay, all right, okay. And so artwork does that to me. A beautiful drawing, like when I'm in Nick Bradshaw's place and I'm seeing this gorgeous thing on his drafting board, I'm like, having to hold a fucking wall. Don't let anyone see me having this reaction. He might appreciate knowing that I don't know. He'd be, oh God, friggin' nerd. But and so writing and art do that. I have to combine these in a way that makes sense. And I thought, well, animation. That's like it's kind of like drawing. It's kind of like writing. They put them together. Let's do that. And so early on, I don't know how this was baked into me. I guess good parenting or just random circumstances lined up in my favor, but I have stupid amounts of self confidence. And so I'm like, I should become an animator. And like, I'm 17 going, okay, I'm going to go do that. And animation school? That sounds like a good idea, but I'm just too impatient. I'm going to go down and knock on the door of an animation house in Toronto and ask if they'll give me a job. And the guy there he's stunned because no kid does that. He goes, okay, you're hired.
Yeah.
And so now I'm emptying pencil sharpeners and doing Joe jobs. He was just like thrilled to, like, this is a little company that did, like like TV commercials, like they'd
Mhm.
snap, crackle, and pop ads, and just that kind of stuff. And
Wow.
so I got to work there for a summer, and I was like, I'm in the middle. And the dream and the reality don't quite line up. I thought, oh, I don't know what I expected, but I didn't expect it to be that much friggin' work and drudgery and sort of political infighting and just like your job is to take this line and make sure it was all like analog stuff. So it's like you dip your little nib in acrylic paint and you draw the little thing and trace it, try not to get, oh, oh, you fucked it up, wipe the whole thing down, use the alcohol cleanser. Okay, done. Put that on the thing. Only 900 more to go. That's your fucking job is that one line, you know? And you're like, where am I gonna? I want Lupin the Third. Did you see
Yeah.
the Miyazaki? Okay, his version, his vision of Lupin the Third. I want to, for some reason, I equated the work of animating with saving princesses from burning castles. Like I want to do
Mm.
that. I want to go climb walls and have that adventure. But it's not really. I'm just drawing a fucking line.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm sorry. I'm cursing on your show. Is that
No, no,
okay?
that's quite all right.
All right,
I cursed all the time.
all
I
right,
cursed earlier, so it's all good.
all right.
Yeah.
And so as a 17, 18-year old learning the like it seems like in retrospect the like why is that even something you had to learn? It doesn't see it seems obvious. No, you're not going to be an adventurer just because you're drawing an adventure, but that wasn't obvious at the time. And so now I'm coming, this is a big existential crisis. And what's wrong with Mark? Everyone liked me, I liked everyone, and I didn't know, but they're like, something's up with this dude. And then something really special happened. They got a contract to make a series of ads for Zellers. And at the time, Zellers was like a big retail. It's kind of like a mini Walmart. And they had this tagline, Zellers, where the lowest price is the law. And they were going to do a series where they were licensing Batman from DC. So they're little animated ads, as enforced by the dynamic duo. So they had all these little 20-second ad spots with Batman fighting, high prices that sting upon the world. And so DC's like, okay, yeah,
That's
you can do
awesome.
this. You pay these ads, but they're going, you know what? We don't want our Cape Crusader. He's our big money maker. We don't want you to mess him up. So we're going to send someone to you. Actually, there's a guy, Ty Templeton. He lives in Toronto. He's now going to be working in your studio.
Oh, yeah, I love Ty.
Isn't he great? So I'm like 17, 18, something like that. And at that time, it was like 87, 88. He was a young man. I don't know, he was just in his 20s, but he was a rock star. And he wasn't just a great illustrator and storyteller. He was also a great verbal communicator. He was so charismatic, and he was fucking hilarious. Like he was just like being around a young god.
Mhm.
And I'm just going, Ty Templeton knows my name, like, and so he had this massive influence on me. And I thought, and I'm like, so tell me more about comics. Oh, comics are great. You get an idea, you can draw it, and like, a day later, you've got a whole hunk of story. This animation stuff looks boring. Like, you spend a year on this stuff, and that's you get 2 seconds out of a month's worth of work. I don't know. I don't know how you guys do it. I go, oh, I don't know either. I want to be a cartoonist just like you. And so that sort of opened up a new way of thinking. And that around that point, I had discovered that there was this semi-thrive. This is when Dave Sim was doing his Cerebus stuff, and it was going strong. And so you're dipping into this like, oh, there's a way of engaging with this medium that bypasses a lot of the standard checks and balances, and just sort of they let anybody in as long as you have a good idea and you can keep a schedule. And so I thought, oh, maybe that's the way to go. So it was kind of like, all right, that looks like it fits with what I'm able to do. I'm gonna make my own comic books. Uh, Great. And not a lot. Well, it was a little bit. There was a little bit of that happening. But you were mentioning before how you're like, oh, I had this great story idea, and I'm pretty sure someone lifted it from me. I've had that feeling dozens of times over the
Yeah.
course of my life, and the way I have um, reconciled that with me is the ether system, where you kind of go and you see it happen. Like, how come we get like, space cowboy movies all coming in a cluster?
Mm.
And is it because one studio is going, what's Universal got going on over there? Like, well, do we have anything like that? We got to keep up with the Joneses. And so I think there's some of that very rational kind of networking that creates clusters. But then you have the typewriter invention story, where two people independently developed the exact same thing on different sides of the planet, and it was because there was sort of a collective social vacuum that required a typewriter to fill it. And I think stories act in much the same way.
Mm.
And there was something that a generation of people around my age at that time, I was like 25, and they all came to the same decision. Yeah, we're all going to release independent comics. And so a couple hundred guys all just sort of came out of nowhere and put their issue ones to the Diamond catalog and gave it their best shot. And for whatever reason, I was maybe 10 months ahead of them in terms of just the curve, and got a little bit more of an edge and did a few things, had a few advantages on my favor. And just so my work took off, and hundreds and hundreds of people they got to issue 3 and vanished because they just didn't quite catch fire.
Mm.
But I don't know. A lot of life is just like not planning. It's just taking the next logical step in a sequence, and you end up where you end up. But I didn't plan any of this. I wouldn't have seen myself being in rural Nova Scotia with 2 dogs howling outside the door, and worrying about coyotes, you know. But I'm really quite happy with where I ended up. So yeah, what got you into it? That's a thing that I want to. I talk too much, and I want to know about you. So yeah, where did you decide that you're gonna jump into the pool, as it were?
Well, it's funny. It's one of those things that comics have always been, for me, it was like I discovered them when I was just like a really young kid. I was always kind of a big reader. In comics, I always loved drawing, and comics obviously put those two things together. And I just, there's a local store when I was a kid that I used to kind of frequent and would always get my comics at. And yeah, I just always really, really loved them and would kind of start making my own little ones here and there. And when I got out, my own. Eventually did a few little ones and kind of were at cons like Alcon and stuff like that doing them. Met a lot of sort of people along the way and made some connections. And yeah, just sort of kept at it. It's always, to me, it's always sort of been, I don't know, there's a real majesty to comics in that like books are so internal. So like and I love books. I read like voraciously. But with comics it's
Mm,
like you like what you said, you kind of get this beautiful storytelling and then this eye-popping art. And what I love too is the differences, the styles. Like you see people, you look at like Watchmen by Dave Gibbons and like that comic always
mm,
really resonated with me in a lot of levels, but like Gibbons' art is just so soulful and like introspective. And when you get to some of those like big existential questions that make you think about the way you would approach it or your own life or this sort of stuff, like it hits so well with Alan Moore's dialogue. And then you go over and look at
mm,
something else that's like, Dave McKean working with, Neil Gaiman or Grant Morrison or one of those guys and see what they're doing. And then you kind
mm,
of go over to this other place and look at like Mark Bagley drawing Spider-Man and like David Micheli, I never pronounce his name right, Michelin. Anyway, what he was doing, these
mm,
sort of crazy bombastic superhero stories, but then this sort of matching beautiful art from like a guy like Bagley. And it
mm.
just like I just love those marriages, those connections. And like you're right, when you see something that
Yeah.
makes the hairs in the back of your neck sort of stand up. And when you hit that in art, like
Mhm.
in a movie or in a book or especially in a comic, like I remember, I think I was probably, oh God, I don't know, 18, 17, 16, maybe when I read Watchmen. And I remember the scene.
Okay.
I don't know how much you remember the comic. I mean, it's been around for a million years, but
Oh, I
the
remember they were they were coming out and I was buying them monthly, couldn't wait for the next one. Yeah.
oh
That
wow,
was
wow.
so I remember all of it.
I
Okay.
only got the trade much later down the line, but that particular story where Rorschach is sort of in prison and he's talking to the prison psychologist.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah, that particular issue always resonated with me on this deeply, darkly like where he says, that line that always stuck with me, where he says, it's not God that that kidnaps little girls. It's not the devil that cuts them up, or fate that feeds them to the dogs. It's just us. And you
Yeah.
have that thing where he talks about burning that guy alive that did it. And you just sort of and then the psychiatrist goes home and he is sort of to resonate with this horrific like realization that we're some of us are fucking monsters and and sometimes we as a society create monsters to deal with them in a way, but like Rorschach's not a good person, he's a monster too. But it just that always struck with me, and the fact that something that's the average person at that time anyway would have sort of saw as disposable, that could resonate a
Mm.
feeling in me that deep and that dark and kind of just like make me think about humanity as a whole and not necessarily like the outcome. I was like, it awe-inspired me that comics could achieve something so internal in me, and I guess it's sort of like a drug addict. You keep chasing that high. You want to find something else, you know.
Mm.
You keep looking for other books that kind of hit you in that same way, and you'll find them. But in the meantime, you have a lot of fun with the bright, colorful superhero stuff in between.
It's just ink on paper. That's the
I
thing that
know,
gets me.
I
It's just
know,
it's just a
yeah.
collection of atoms. It's like there's nothing there, and yet like the artist isn't there. You know, uh, the author whose name I've forgotten. Who the heck wrote Watchmen? Um, I'm getting old. This happens to me. Alan Moore. Alan Moore isn't sitting across from you with those crazy eyes telling you blah blah blah. No, he's written something and it's transmitted, and it's you alone with this piece of paper that's dirty, but dirty in a specific way, and you're having that reaction. And I find that's magic. That's just seems miraculous to me. And it's just that we can have that experience as humans is just remarkable. And that's the sort of thing that would make me, and it sounds like with you as well, is like, how do I need to engage with this super special power and I don't understand it, and by playing with it maybe I can get closer to knowing a bit more about it. But no, I know exactly what you're talking about. Do you
Yeah.
remember the first sort of because I was reading Family Circus by what's his name, Dave Keene or whatever.
Mhm.
Saturday comics. They've always been part of my life, but then there was that one time where something changed. Which one was it? Was it Watchmen for you?
For the most part, I don't know if that was the first one. I think it took me a little longer to get to that one than some of the other stuff. It may have been like I feel like it might have been Grant Morrison because he's someone that's always sort of stuck with me. It was probably his Animal Man. I think that's the
Hmm.
first time because that was always I've always been a big animal person. I feel like you and I are probably alike in that way.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I remember reading that book and like, oh, well, this guy like is a vegetarian and he's fighting for animals, and they had these deep, like, uh, very deep sort of looks at like how we treat animals, how we treat the world that we are given, and the idea that like a comic would I don't know make me question stuff like that even at a young age. That was probably the first one that brought me to the dance. I feel like there's other stuff. I know I had friends that were really into Warren Ellis when I was young, and they gave me like Transmetropolitan and some other books like that that sort of
Oh yeah. I forgot about Transmetropolitan. Okay,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
and like his Planetary, which was sort of deconstructing the superhero stuff and doing some really interesting stuff with that. But I think the one that probably opened my eyes the most that really interested me was Morrison's Doom Patrol, because that was like
Okay.
real human story. Like there are these ridiculous creatures and monsters, and there's like a guy who was a race car driver and his brain's in a robot, and it has all this like ridiculous continuity that came from decades of comics that came before it. But when Morrison got it, he made it so human. And it really embraced the weird. So like you just they would use it to sort of explore all these things about like your relationship to your body, like how you've body dysmorphia, how you feel living in your own skin, and would use that to sort of explore these different crazy characters. Like there's a character that was sort of because of the nature of his powers was sort of a male and a female at the same time. There was a woman who had these crazy split personalities, and each one had its own power, but like there's still something. He always found a way to keep it human somehow, despite all this really flashy, bright, crazy stuff. And that was enough to sort
You
of
know what that
connect with me.
Doom Patrol. Just as you were talking, I'll throw this out there and stop
Hmm.
interrupting. But it's it strikes me that when people talk about when they were kids and reading the Fantastic Four when it was invented,
Hmm.
um, the way you were describing Doom Patrol resonates with sort of their experience of the Fantastic Four, which neither of us got to experience as it was happening.
Yes.
But when I remember these old guys talking about it, it's like this is the first time that you were looking at real people. Like they actually have marital disagreements.
Yeah.
They're not always happy. They're not, there's Ben Grimm and he's angry all the time and he's got to deal with these things. That was such a watershed moment in comics fiction. It was like a new technology almost. And what you're describing is like, oh, it's like almost, it's kind of the same sort of reveal, except we've gone beneath. It's not just marital disagreements. Sometimes people have some really deep challenges that they're wrestling with,
Yeah.
and how do you portray that in a superhero comic? And I think a lot of people can resonate that with that as times
That
get more complicated.
that's very interesting and pretty true in the way that like because like what I guess society was focused on when like that came out, like Spider-Man and Fantastic Four. It would be like that was sort of jaw-dropping, like for instance, I Love Lucy is the first person to show like a married couple sharing a bed, like going to bed in the same bed, and that was like awe-inspiring,
Oh wow, yeah.
when they did that on TV. So it's kind of like as society got more open about issues, and then like so when we got to like the Doom Patrol, it's like the 80s, and there are characters that are like gay and transsexual and like and all these things that are starting to become more in the forefront of media and sort of it's sort of reflecting that. So it's funny that like the comics tend to reflect what's going on in society. Like I know I was thinking about this the other day because of the Punisher. Like his whole character was sort of an answer to
Mm,
Vietnam, and he came out around when Vietnam had wrapped up, just shortly after, when
mm.
people were coming home and were really messed up from their experiences. And like it's funny how these sort of benchmarks in comics also mirror the real world and the issues at the time. So I think that was probably why.
Oh no, I think that's where all good stories come from. That, yeah.
Yeah. There you have it, the first part of my conversation with Mark Oakley. Tune in next week for part 2. If you noticed anything a little odd with the audio in this particular episode, I don't think you should. I made it pretty seamless with my edits, but there was a bad snowstorm going on when Mark and I were talking, and because of that, some of the audio came a little garbled. If any of it remains in this, it's because what Mark was saying was too important to the scope or the context of the part of the conversation we were in to cut, but I'm pretty sure my seamless editing made it hard to tell. So if you notice something, that's the reason, but I don't do a ton of editing with my conversations because I don't really have time. But, sometimes things happen and you got to get in there and do a little editing. I'm pretty sure it's seamless. I'm pretty sure you probably didn't even notice. I probably didn't even bring it up, but I did. And now you know. And now we're both accomplices in this. So we're here together. So be sure to tune in next week to part 2 of my conversation with Mark Oakley, in which we get into talking about his influences involving his works, including Thieves and Kings and Star Drop, and it's a blast. Mark's a great guy. Very easy to talk to. When you start talking about philosophy, about the way people look at life, and really get into the weeds of what they think about this whole rigmarole we call existence, that's when I feel like I'm in the pocket with talking to these guests. And we certainly got into that with Mark. So great talk, great conversation. And you'll get to enjoy part 2 of it next week. I'll look forward to talking to you then. But in the meantime, stay safe, have fun, and go read some of Mark Oakley's comics. They are fantastic. The Graphic Histories Podcast is a proud partner of the United Federation of Podcasts.